Well, I got to talk about Goonergate, the latest in the cultural battlefield that is gaming. A lot of infighting between the anti-woke side with this one. The woke side seems to not really care because it's so far removed from what they're doing, it doesn't matter, I guess. But, I'm going to read an article, kind of give my take. It's probably not going to be what you agree with, but I got to say what I have to say, and I got to say my piece, and hopefully you'll get something from it in terms of my perspective on this whole situation, especially since I am a Christian and I do kind of line up with that mentality. And I've noticed a lot of things on the anti-woke side of gaming, as it were, lately that do concern me quite a bit. But we're going to get into that. Before we do, we're going to read this article from SmashJT. Now, normally I very much agree with what he has to say, but I think he's got it wrong this time. But we're just going to read some segments here. I'm going to put the link in the article, link for the article in the video, so you can check it out yourself. And so let's just jump into it. A new challenger appears. Religion. Goonergate explained. Those of us buried in the sands of internet time know that the gaming industry has been no stranger to cultural battles, and for years now, the community has fought back hard to preserve the creative freedom that's made gaming a groundbreaking, artistic, and entertaining medium. Just when the tide seemed to be turning, when woke games pushing divisive ideologies took massive losses after massive losses, and gamers rallied together to celebrate freedom of choice in gaming, a seemingly new faction emerges to try and take the reins of the religious side, determined to play moral arbiter over what the community should and should not be allowed to enjoy. Sound familiar? And he's got some tweets quoted here. When you are becoming exactly what you are fighting against and you are no better than those who you are trying to stop. Woke ideology and Christian morals are not the same thing. Wrong both want to push their own ideologies on people who may not necessarily be interested in them. Weird you wrote wrong and then agreed they are different by noting their own ideologies, albeit Christianity is not an ideology. An ideology is a system of ideas and ideals, which all religions are. If you think because one is the word of God, that makes it different, makes it special. Now, whether you see that the way it is or not is not really what I'm looking at here. But the big thing that started this whole thing is this reply from Dread Roberts. Any person with a modicum of decency would say no. And this is to that original post up here, which is a post of Haley, the protagonist from The First Descendant, or a protagonist from The First Descendant, shaking her ass on screen. And Pirate Nation is saying, is this what gamers want? And a lot of people were saying, absolutely, this is what gamers want. This is the thing. And Dread Roberts said any person with a modicum of decency would say no. This is not where the future of gaming should be headed. The constant promotion of half-naked women as the greener side of the gaming is getting ridiculous. And I'm beginning to think that these people who say they want to save gaming don't actually want to save it. So many claim to care about morals and the future generations and not giving even an inch of progress to devs who push woke ideology or whatever else, but then they'll turn around and tell young men and women to support these titles that throw this stuff in your face. Most of what I've seen for months now from these accounts are butt cheeks and cleavage. Seriously, how is this making games better? All we're doing is pushing normies in the same direction but on a parallel track. People may argue we just want to push back on the ugly women agenda, just trying to make a point to the lefty weirdos. Okay, so where do we draw the line then? Because there doesn't appear to be one. This is why I say we need real adults with real ambitions, aspirations, and a mature outlook on the future to lead the charge in the industry. People who have their priorities straight and their arousal in check. And a lot of that, some of it I think he goes off the rails a little bit, but a lot of it I do agree with. Specifically, I've noticed a lot in gaming lately, especially in social media gaming. It's a lot of posts of Eve. It's a lot of posts of First Descendant. It's a lot of posts of TNA. And, sure, sex sells. I mean, that has been known for time immemorial. But I think there's a point to be made here, even a secular point. So we're going to get into that secular point right away. That secular point is that doesn't advance gaming. All that does is sell copies. Sex sells, but if all you're selling is sex, then there's no substance to that game. There's no substance that's pushing gaming forward. Now, I'm not saying that First Descendant is not a good game. I think First Descendant was a very competent title, is a very competent title. It's still going. And I played it quite a bit. It's not really my cup of tea. but I can recognize a good game when I see it. I can recognize something that would be interesting for people that want to play that kind of a looter shooter environment. Yeah, it was great. It was a lot of fun, and it wasn't just pretty girls. There's there's men and women. There's males and females as characters in that game, and you can pick and choose who you want, and you can there's options. The other side of that coin, though, if you haven't actually played the game, you kind of don't even know that side exists. You don't even know that you could be a dude in the game. Like all you see on social media is the women, because they're very attractive, they're very buxom, and they're not wearing a lot of clothing usually. That's just how it's been going lately, and it's something that I think does need to be put in check in social media and in game development in general, because of a variety of factors. And obviously the secular one is that gameplay should be the first class citizen. Gameplay should come first. Above graphics, above everything else, it should be a fun game first. The basis of social media commentary around gaming should be based in that, should be couched in gameplay as a first class citizen, as the primary reason why you're playing the game. A lot of people, a lot of these games are just glorified cutscene simulators, and I just detest that. I hate that. I hate it when all it is just an interactive movie. I want something more substantial than that. Now, First Descendant absolutely was not a interactive movie. It was actually very engaging. It is a good game, and nobody was talking about that. Nobody was talking about First Descendant being a good game. All they're doing is Gooner posting about it. And it leads me to question whether these people even played that game or not. But, that's the main concern I have, is that we're not going down a good road here. And it's being led by social media, and it's being picked up by the developers, and exploited by the developers to sell copies. And that makes perfect sense for them, especially the Korean and the Chinese and the Japanese. Well, not so much the Japanese. They're still kind of rooted in that woke ideology world, it seems, so they're kind of stuck. But they're fairly secular nations you're looking at, and they'll do whatever they have to do to sell copies and make themselves more money. And then Western studios are stuck in woke. So what's left? I mean, now we're down to two options. So great job, anti-woke. We've now gone from only one option in gaming, which is the woke option, to two options, which is the woke and the Gooner option. And there's no real other options that are being discussed. That's not to say there aren't other options in gaming, because there are. There's some fantastic games out there. There's some fantastically popular games out there, and nobody talks about it. Nobody talks about how a farming simulator has been going for years and years, and every couple of years they come out with a new one and they sell ridiculous amounts of copies, and they're just printing money hand over fist with that game. Nobody talks about the community that was built around that they basically built from scratch, from nothing. Nobody wants to talk about those kind of things, because there's no pretty ladies in Farming Simulator. It's just farms. So I don't know. I think that's a major problem in social media as it relates to gaming. And, I'm trying to do something a little different here, because, the Gooner posting is not what I'm about. I am absolutely not about that. You're never going to get that kind of a game from me. If I ever get a game out there, it is not going to have that kind of stuff to sell it. I would prefer to have a fun game and just build it on my merits. And if I can't build a game on the merits of it being fun and enjoyable, if the only option to me as a developer is to put sexy women in it to sell copies, then I'm going to close my doors and I'm done. Because that's not how my studio is going to function. That's not how my studio functions now, nor will it in the future. And the fact of the matter is, if that's the case, I'm not going to be the only studio that closes their doors over that. So it is a slippery slope. It is a questionable area, because you are looking at studios that are going to shut down, because if the only option is either woke or Gooner, then they're not going to continue on, because they're not going to be able to make those kind of games, or they're not going to be willing to make those kind of games. I don't think that that's the case. I think that's more of an echo chamber thing. I think that, social media, and especially like people like SmashJT and myself, we're all stuck in this echo chamber in Twitter land and in Twitter and YouTube land, or X and YouTube land. And there's a whole world out there that is well beyond our reach. Because I'm seeing it in the numbers. I see the numbers coming through with these games, and it's clear that there is a certain segment of the gaming population that is connected to X, is connected to YouTube, is connected to all these channels and listening to these things. But there's a significantly larger chunk of that gaming population that doesn't pay attention to us at all, that just play games. And, I think there is a market for way more than just sexy ladies on the screen, just like there is a market for way more than just, woke grandstanding on the screen. So I am still hopeful, at least, in that. So with all of that stuff out of the way, with all the secular stuff out of the way, now we're going to delve into the Christian side of things. And I'm going to talk a little bit about, what I believe and how I see this situation unfolding. And I'm going to talk about Dread Roberts here's post a little bit more too, because there's some interesting points that they made. I mean, we kind of covered the half-naked women as greener side of the gaming is getting ridiculous. So you kind of have my take on that. But the and that most of the things that are coming from these accounts is like butt cheeks and cleavage, and that is a major issue. I've had to unfollow certain accounts on X because that's all they posted is this fan service nonsense. And it's not something I want on my feed. I wish they didn't post it. I wish they would post like they used to post before all this happened. And maybe they will eventually, and then I'll follow them again because I like their takes on things and I like to hear people's perspectives. But I don't want all this trash on my feed, and so I'm gonna weed it out. So I'm gonna stop following you, because if that's all you're posting now, then I don't need it. And that's kind of my whole approach to this whole thing is I'm not asking for censorship. I'm not asking for the things that the woke studios were asking for. They were top down. I mean, this is more grassroots. This is a concept of, kind of having some introspection with our community and realizing that this is actually a serious problem, and it's something that has been growing for years. And it is taking attention away from actually having fun games to play, actually having something focused on the content of the game and not just, the size of the cleavage, I guess, to kind of paraphrase a famous quote. So it's more of an issue now than it's ever been before. And I think we need to kind of just look at it, not top-down enforcement, not force game developers to get sexy ladies out of their games. You can do that if you want. You can put this fan service stuff in if you want. You can do that and tag it in the stores, tag it on Steam with whatever you're adding, nudity or whatever, or violence or whatever. Make sure it's properly tagged. Make sure it's adult tagged so that kids don't get it, and we're fine. I have no problem with that. As long as it's not being peddled to kids, then sure, you're good. Now, would I say that, even to this degree, is this worthy of like an MA-17 rating? I don't think it is. I think this is not out of the realm of insanity, but it brought up a point that this is becoming a problem. And I would say if my studio was marketing this to like 10-year-olds and 12-year-olds, I would have a major problem with that. I would not feel right about doing that. Now, other studios can have their own opinion, but that's my perspective, is I would not feel right personally having a studio that would peddle this to minors. So, take that for what it is. But, I'm not saying that other studios can't do it, but it is questionable, and it's certainly something that would prevent me from buying their games. It would prevent me from doing business with them in any sense of the matter. Even like if a publisher was doing this with some of the studios that they publish for, I would not do business with that publisher. So, from that perspective, it's more of a free market. You're going to pay the price, at least from me, Maybe that doesn't mean much, and it certainly doesn't to anybody right now. But, and I'm not the only studio that would have that perspective either. So I think, it is something that the market can decide. I think that, having the option there, as long as it's within a certain degree of, restriction, like, you can't market these things to kids. You can't market you can't market sex to kids. All right. You just can't do that. That's where I cut off. That's where I say absolutely not. But you can market this to adults who are going to play these games. You can have this kind of fan service for mature adults that are supposedly capable of making informed decisions and understanding the situation. Now, we'll get into that in a moment too, but that's perfectly fine. I think in this day and age, there's a lot of Christians out there that are going to say, yes, we need to have, Christian law and this, that, and the other thing. And I don't think that that's an appropriate solution either, because, all right, so getting into some biblical stuff, and I'm sure that a lot of you guys are not Christian at all, but here we go. We're gonna get into it. So my belief is that because we're Christians, because Jesus Christ died on the cross, because we are in this broken generation, and by broken generation, it's referring to effectively the world as it stands from the death of Christ forward till today and into the future. That's the broken generation. That's what they refer to whenever you hear a Christian talk about that, or this generation or what have you. That's what they're referring to. But in that world, Christians had never had the kind of power that the Old Testament Israelites had. The Old Testament Israelites could enforce law, could, prevent people from worshiping false gods, did do that, and it was rewarded when they did, and it was punished when they didn't. Now, in this world, we're the underdogs. We've been the underdogs. We're kind of, Christianity is a very universal religion, but the fact of the matter is, in this day and age, we are just as much underdogs now as we were in the time of Jesus Christ. And with that perspective, I think we need to take the perspective that he took, which is that we are underdogs. We have to, prepare ourselves for dealing with the world and not pushing the world into doing things. There's no ability for us to do that anyway. So, trying to say, well, we're going to enforce censorship on these games, it ain't going to happen, first of all. And second of all, it shouldn't happen, because I don't think you can legislate salvation. At the end of the day, I think that there's no law that exists on the books that can save a soul. So, in my perspective, someone needs to be saved on their own accord, on their own heart. They can't be legislated into it. They can't be brought into Christianity at the tip of a barrel, as it were. You can't enforce laws to make people live according to God's law. You can't do that. It doesn't work, because it has to be on your heart, and that is something that I think more Christians should champion. But that is what it is. And so, in my perspective, I don't think censorship would work. I don't think censorship is a viable solution as a Christian, and certainly not as an American. And so, I believe there can be a market for this, but there should be an awareness of the fact that it is poisoning our civilization. It is poisoning people's souls. It is a detrimental thing to your well-being, to your spiritual well-being. And nobody is talking about that side of things. Not the Christians or the secularists or both sides of this. Nobody's getting into that part, because a lot of people will bring up, and this is a common argument, once Christianity is brought up about something, once this, the perspective of getting the sexuality out of video games is brought up, they say, well, you're okay with violence in video games? Yeah, I am, because there is not a soul on the face of this earth that doesn't realize that violence is wrong in real life, that doesn't realize that the violence that's in these video games is not acceptable. It's fantasy. It's not real. And everyone has that understanding. Even younger people have that understanding that in the real world, it's not okay for you to do these things. Now, with the sexual side of things, with the goonerism, people don't, not kids, not adults, not anybody, thinks that it's even wrong. There's no recognition that this is a harmful act, that this is something that is poisoning your soul. And in my opinion, it is. Even as a secular person, you have to admit that, this is not a good behavior to have. It creates, it poisons your soul. It poisons your spirit. It poisons your mind. You become dependent on it. It's like a drug. And, even without the spiritual side of things in perspective, even as a secular side of things, psychologically speaking, it is addictive. It is just like a drug. And lots of people have studied this, and pornography is just as bad as, any old street drug. So, you have to understand you're poisoning yourself. And nobody seems to understand that. Nobody seems to understand that, making that association, the fact that nobody sees the issue, nobody's even talking about that, and yet they're making this comparison like it's just like violence, where people understand that it's not okay to fantasize about these kind of things in real life. It's not okay to have that trigger in your life, that temptation. And, like I said, going back to Christianity, I think that it's established in the Christian law, in biblical, the Ten Commandments, that this is a wrong action, and Jesus harped on this a lot. Like, sexual sin was a big problem. So Christians are doubly careful about this because of how important it was to Jesus. But even in the Old Testament, like I said, adultery is wrong. Sexual sin is wrong, even in the Old Testament, and doubly so in the New. So those laws are there. Those things are there in the Bible to tell you that these are harmful for you. We didn't need a psychologist to tell us that. We didn't need these studies to say it's just like a drug, because it was written in the Bible. And in the Bible's, it's a set of rules to live by in this world for our benefit. It's not like we're trying to appease God. It's for our own benefit. These rules are to live a good life on earth. And then, also be delivered into heaven. But it is to be better in life. It's not about appeasing God. It's about living a good life. It's about being a good person. It's about being healthy. And that's what the laws in the Old Testament, doubly so, were all about. There's numerous cases about, especially in like Leviticus, in the works written by Moses, but Leviticus especially, it's a lot to do with quarantining people and especially with leprosy, but any kind of ailment. There's processes and procedures, because they didn't have the modern medicine, and they had these laws to protect themselves, to keep themselves from having these things spread throughout the entire village or city or what have you. And moving that from the medical side to the spiritual side, part of that is this sexual sin, is this adultery, are these adulterous thoughts. And that's more of the spiritual side of things, but it is just as important as, quarantining people who have leprosy and keeping them away from everybody else so that it doesn't spread. It's the same reason that those laws are there. It's for us in life. So went on to a bit of a religious tear there. Hopefully you guys aren't too pissed about that, but I wanted to kind of put my thoughts out there about how this, my take on these things and where I stand on this, because I think games should have the freedom. I think especially game developers should have the freedom and make the kind of games they want to make. But we have to accept the fact that we are heading down a very dangerous road here. And, maybe I'm making mountains out of molehills, but, prancing booty around the screen is not a way to sell a game, in my opinion. It's not a way to push this movement forward. Is not a way for gaming to evolve, because it's all about fun games. It's not really about watching, pretty girls on the screen, in my opinion. But again, I could be wrong. If that's the case, then maybe I should duck out of this, to be perfectly honest, because I don't want to be involved in an industry where that's the direction we head. And I don't think that that's the case. I really don't. I think that there is a bubble on social media that is starting to head down that road, but I think we need to broaden our horizons. I think a little introspection about this situation is certainly in order, and for my tiny channel to be saying that, it's not gonna, it's gonna fall on deaf ears from here. But hopefully somebody else will say it that's a little more, has a little more pull in this little community of ours. But yeah, that's pretty much what I got for you guys. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you like these kind of things, subscribe to the channel, and I will talk to you guys later.